one knock on the door, one rainy night. And everything changed for a man who thought he had nothing left to lose. He wasn't looking for a second chance, but it showed up anyway, wrapped in a wet blanket and holding a child's hand. If you believe in quiet kindness, second chances, and the kind of stories that stay with you long after the credits roll, like, subscribe, and let this one unfold. The wind came first, howling through the bare limbs of the maple trees and rattling the windows of Jack Nolan's cabin like a warning. Then came the rain, steady, hard, cold, drumming on the roof in a rhythm that made the silence inside feel even heavier. Jack sat in the living room, a mug of lukewarm coffee untouched, in his hand. The fire in the stove had started to settle, its orange light flickering across the wooden floor. Outside, night fell like a slow curtain. Inside, everything stayed still, except for the memory. His fingers drifted unconsciously to the scar, tissue climbing up his left wrist, disappearing under the cuff of his flannel shirt. He didn't need to look at it. He knew every line, every twist. It was the only thing the fire hadn't taken. Then came the knock. 3 small raps. Hesitant but urgent. Jack didn't move at first. The road that led to his place was gravel and mud, and no one ever came up this far unless they meant to. He waited. Then the knock came again. He stood, bones stiff, joints tight from the change in temperature. When he opened the door, the cold hit him first, then the sight of her. She couldn't have been more than 30. Soaked through, her hair matted to her face, one hand gripping a blanket around a small girl, maybe 5, maybe 6, curled against her chest. The woman looked at him with a mixture of resolve and fear. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. We need somewhere to stay. Just for the night." Jack looked at the child. Her lips were blue, her breath shallow. The wind whipped around them like it wanted to drag them both away. His first instinct was to shut the door, not out of cruelty, out of survival. He had built this silence like a wall, one stone at a time, over 4 long years. Letting anyone in meant risking it all tumbling down. But then the girl coughed. It was a dry, ragged sound, too familiar, and he stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated just a beat, then nodded. "Thank you." The woman crossed the threshold, careful not to drip too much water on the wood floor. Jack grabbed a wool blanket from the back of the couch and wrapped it around the girl, then stoked the fire with trembling hands. "I'm Emily," she said quietly. "This is Lily." Jack gave a single nod. "Jack." He moved through the room like a man relearning space. He set the kettle on the stove, poured a cup of hot water, found a bag of chamomile he hadn't touched in years. She cradled it in her palms like something sacred. "I'm sorry," she said again. "We didn't mean to intrude. We were headed to a shed, old property on the south end of town. But the road washed out. And Lily, she doesn't look good," Jack said flatly. "No," Emily admitted, her voice cracking. "She hasn't slept well in weeks." The little girl had curled up on the couch now, half wrapped in layers. She didn't stir. The fire grew stronger. Shadows danced on the walls, and for the first time in years, Jack's house didn't feel so dead. "You hungry?" he asked. Emily looked up, surprised. "Yes, but I've got soup." He ladled out what was left of the chicken and barley into 2 bowls. She ate like someone trying not to be seen eating. He watched her hands, the way they trembled, the way she shielded the girl even in rest. Something old and rusted in him. Moved just slightly. They didn't talk much. He liked that. But there was something in the quiet that settled deep. A presence. Not invasive, not demanding. Just there. After a while, Jack stood and walked to the linen closet. "There's a bed in the spare room. It's not much, but it's dry. You can stay the night." Emily's eyes welled, but she blinked quickly and nodded. "Thank you, Jack." "Really?" He didn't respond, just turned off the stove light and walked down the hall to his room. Before he closed the door, he paused. The firelight reached the couch where Lily slept. Emily sat beside her, tucking in the blanket, lips pressed to the girl's damp forehead. Jack closed his door. But the silence didn't return the same way it used to. It carried footsteps now, and the faint sound of breathing that wasn't his own. Morning came slow. The light filtered through the gray clouds like a memory trying to return. Jack sat at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee gone lukewarm again. The house smelled faintly of damp wool and ash, but also something else. Now, breath, presence, life. He could hear them in the other room. A soft laugh, Lily's, bright and high like a chime. Then Emily's voice, hushed, comforting. Jack stared into the cup, as if it held a question he wasn't ready to ask. She came into the kitchen a few minutes later, Lily clinging to the hem of her sweater. Her hair was tied up now, her face cleaner, but her eyes still carried the same fatigue, the same guarded sadness. "We really should be going," she said, glancing out the window at the gray drizzle. "I don't want to overstay." "You said you had a place." She nodded. "An old shed. South end of town. It used to belong to my grandfather. My mother passed it down in her will. It's not much, but it's ours." Jack nodded slowly, his thumb tracing the rim of his mug. "Shed's probably in rough shape if it's been sitting empty." "It is." She hesitated. "I went there last week. Roof's bad, door's broken, there's no heat, but I can fix it up." "With a kid?" She lifted her chin slightly. "I'll manage." Jack didn't reply. He looked at the girl now, sitting quietly on the edge of the couch holding a chipped wooden horse he didn't remember keeping. Her fingers stroked it carefully, like she was afraid it would break. "I've got tools," he said finally. "I'll take a look." "If it's as bad as you say, you won't make it through the week." Emily opened her mouth, and to argue maybe or say thank you, but in the end she just nodded. Quiet gratitude. Jack stood, grabbed his jacket, and gestured toward the truck. They drove in silence past thinning cornfields and shuttered barns. The road to the shed was half swallowed by overgrowth, the kind of path time tries to erase. When they arrived, Jack parked on the grass and stared at what she called a shed. It was worse than he expected. The siding peeled like sunburned skin. The roof slanted at an angle that suggested collapse, but there was a chimney, crumbling but standing, and a porch post still sturdy enough to lean on. Lily ran ahead to the door, tugging it open with effort. Inside was dust, cobwebs, and rot, but there was space. Enough for warmth. Enough for hope. "You see?" Emily said, arms crossed but voice hopeful. "It has bones." Jack crouched, ran his hand along the floorboard. "Yeah, bones that need a lot of bracing. I can pay you," she added quickly. "Not much, but I don't want your money." He stood. "I'll bring my truck by tomorrow. We'll start with the roof." Emily looked at him, lips parted like she wasn't sure what to say. "Why are you doing this?" He shrugged, starting back toward the truck. "Winter's coming." That night Jack sat by the fire again. He hadn't invited them back, but they returned anyway. Emily holding a paper bag with canned soup and Lily carrying a thank you note with stick figures. "I didn't think you'd want company," Emily said, setting the bag on the counter. "I don't," Jack said, "but the kids got good taste in art." She laughed, and for a moment it sounded like something normal, not new, not fragile. After dinner, Lily fell asleep on the couch again. Emily stayed by the fire, her hands wrapped around a mug of weak tea. "My husband used to call me naive," she said suddenly. "Said people like me didn't survive long without someone fixing their messes." Jack didn't look at her, but his jaw clenched slightly. "He around?" She shook her head. "He's not welcome here. Not anymore." The fire crackled. The rain had stopped, but wind still scraped against the windows. "You're not naive," Jack said after a long pause. "You're just still fighting." She looked over at him, and something flickered in her eyes. Not warmth, not yet, but maybe the memory of it. "Thanks, Jack." He didn't reply, but when she carried Lily to the spare room again, he added another log to the fire, just in case they needed warmth a little longer. The next morning brought with it a sky the color of wet wool and the kind of breeze that whispered winter's name. Jack pulled into the shed's gravel shoulder with his old red truck rattling, like a promise held together by duct tape and habit. In the bed of the truck sat a bundle of lumber, a tarp, his toolbox, and a thermos of black coffee. Emily was already there, pacing outside the structure with her arms crossed tight over her chest. Lily sat on the porch steps drawing shapes into the dirt with a stick. "I didn't think you'd come," Emily said as he stepped down. Jack grunted. "Didn't say I wouldn't." She gave a quick nod and stepped aside, letting him walk the perimeter in silence. He examined the frame, touched the splintering beams, eyed the rot creeping up the baseboards like a secret shame. It was worse than he'd thought yesterday, but not hopeless. "You weren't kidding," he muttered. "I told you," she replied, half smiling. "But I've seen worse. My mother once patched a roof with a road sign." Jack didn't smile, but something in his shoulders loosened. She sounds like someone who got things done. She was, right up until the end. Lily wandered over, held up a rock shaped vaguely like a heart. Jack crouched, turned it over in his hand. "Pretty good find," she beamed. "You can keep it." He glanced at Emily, then tucked it into his coat pocket. "Thanks." They worked through the morning. Jack up on the roof, Emily handing him tools from the ladder. Lily sang nonsense songs from the porch and occasionally offered pine cones, like currency. The rhythm of it was slow but sure, the kind of quiet labor that wore down walls faster than any confession. Jack hadn't worked beside someone in years. Not like this. Not with the hum of another person's breath just below his boots. Not with the occasional touch of a hand as a hammer changed fingers. They stopped for lunch sitting on the back bumper of his truck. Emily unwrapped peanut butter sandwiches. Jack poured them coffee. "So you always fix things for strangers?" she asked, teasing just enough to invite conversation but not push. "No," Jack said. "Only when they're stubborn enough to fix what's broken." Emily looked down at her cup. "You think I'm stubborn? I think you didn't run from this place. That counts." She smiled then, small, unpolished, but real. And it made the space between them feel less like a gap and more like a bridge. Later, as they hoisted a new beam into place, the old roof groaned in resistance. Jack swore under his breath, nearly lost balance, but Emily caught the base of the support just in time. "I've got it," she shouted. He looked down at her, breath heavy. "You shouldn't have. You needed help." He froze for a second longer than necessary, then nodded. "All right, let's brace it." They worked well into dusk. The shed, while far from finished, now had a patched roof and a tarp secured against the northern wind. Jack packed up his tools, glanced once more at Lily asleep on a blanket near the door. Emily watched him watching. "She asked if we were staying here for good," Emily said. "If this could be our home." Jack leaned against the truck. "What did you say?" "I said maybe. If we're lucky." He didn't answer, but he pulled something from his coat, the heart-shaped rock, and placed it on the porch rail. She might be right. They stood in silence for a moment, breathing in the scent of pine and old wood and autumn's slow descent. Then Emily stepped closer. "You don't talk much, do you?" "No. I'm starting to like that." Jack didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched, the closest he got. When he drove away that night, the porch light still glowed behind him. A warm spot in the dark, a marker that said, someone is still here. Someone is still trying. Back at his cabin, Jack didn't turn on the television like he usually did. He sat in the quiet, poured a second cup of coffee even though the hour was late, and looked out the window. The house wasn't silent anymore. It still held echoes, and outside, the rock in his pocket had left a weight he couldn't quite explain. Something small, something steady, like breath returning to a place that had been holding it too long. And for the first time in a very long time, Jack Nolan didn't feel like a man waiting out the clock. He felt like a man beginning again. The next week passed in slow rhythms, hammering, lifting, bracing, resting. Jack worked like he was pouring himself into the bones of the shed, not speaking more than needed, but showing up every morning, tools in hand, a thermos of coffee ready. Emily brought sandwiches, hot tea in old jars, and sometimes a story or two about her mother that made him grunt in something close to amusement. Each day brought small victories: a fixed step, a sealed corner, a draft blocked, and with every board nailed, something shifted in the air between them, lighter, looser, less fragile. It was on a Thursday that the name came back to haunt him. Sheriff Briggs pulled up in his cruiser, stepped out with a tired gait and a kind nod. He was a tall man with shoulders that had seen war and eyes that had seen more. Jack wiped his hands on his jeans and met him halfway. "Morning, Jack." "Sheriff. Just checking on things. Heard from Evelyn at the bakery you've been doing some serious building out here." Jack glanced at the half-finished porch. "Trying." Briggs peered past him, gave a friendly wave to Emily, who returned it with a cautious smile. "You Wilkes?" the sheriff asked, turning back. Emily froze. Jack looked between them. Emily exhaled slowly. "Yes, Emily Wilkes." Briggs nodded like he already knew. "Didn't mean to surprise you, just hadn't heard that name in a long time. Your grandfather, he was good people, ran the biggest dairy spread in the county, Wilkes Farms. You know that land still runs nearly 3,000 acres. Jack's gaze narrowed, not at Briggs but at her. Emily lowered her head slightly. "I wasn't hiding it, I just didn't think it mattered." Jack stepped back, folded his arms. "You own all this?" She didn't flinch. "It came to me, in a will. I didn't ask for it, I didn't even want it, not at first, I just needed somewhere far enough to start over. Somewhere no one would look." The sheriff cleared his throat. "Well, I'll leave you folks to it. If you need anything, my number hasn't changed." When the cruiser disappeared down the road, silence fell heavier than hammers ever did. "You knew," Jack said quietly. Emily shook her head. "I didn't know how to say it, what it would sound like. That I walked away from all that land, all that legacy." Jack looked at the shed, then back at her. "And decided to live here? In this?" "It's not about where I'm living," she replied, a small shake in her voice. "It's about how. The land, it reminds me of people who hurt me, people who thought they could own things, including me." He didn't say anything, just picked up his hammer and went back to work. But the weight of her name followed him. That night, Emily didn't bring dinner. Jack ate alone, staring at the unfinished edge of the table they'd started building together. It still needed sanding, still needed finish, but it was solid, real like her. He found her the next morning already at work, hammering crookedly at a frame. "You're hitting it too shallow," he said. "I know." He took the hammer gently from her, not angry, just firm. He finished the nail, handed it back. "Your name doesn't scare me," he said, "but not trusting me, that does." Emily looked up, eyes shining. "I'm sorry." Jack shrugged. "I don't need your past. I just need to know you're not walking away again." "I'm not." A long pause. "Good," he said. That afternoon, Lily drew a picture of the three of them standing under a tree. Jack stuck it on the shed wall with a thumbtack. It stayed there, even as wind pushed through the open window. By dusk, the shed had a working door and a fire pit out back. Jack tossed a few dry logs in and lit it with a long match. Emily sat beside him, Lily curled up in her lap. He handed her a mug of coffee. She took it with both hands. "You're quiet again," she said. "I'm thinking." "About what?" He stared at the flame. "That names don't matter as much as what you build under them." They sat like that a long time. Three people bound by wood, firelight, and a silence that meant something more than fear. That night, Jack went home with sawdust in his sleeves, and a name he no longer minded carrying in his thoughts. Wilkes. It didn't mean wealth or legacy to him. It meant someone stayed, even when it would have been easier to run. October settled into the bones of the town like smoke in old wood. The mornings came colder now, breath rising in visible clouds as Jack hauled timber from his truck and unloaded it by the shed. Frost hugged the grass just long enough to remind everyone what was coming. Inside the shed, the warmth of a small space and a stubborn wood stove made it livable, barely. Jack had patched up the walls, braced the roof, and repaired the crooked window frames. Still, the wind crept in at night like it had keys. Emily had started bringing color back into the space. A checkered quilt on the cot, a blue tin cup with wildflowers, Lily's drawing strung on twine between nails. Nothing much, but enough to make it theirs. Jack found himself lingering after the day's work ended. He brought firewood, fixed hinges. That didn't squeak, sat longer at the fire. Some nights he didn't leave until Lily was already asleep and Emily was stirring tea with a spoon she always forgot to put down. He didn't talk much. Didn't need to. She filled the spaces with gentle observations, a hum while cooking, laughter when Lily said something strange and beautiful. Jack listened and let himself feel the ache of something he hadn't touched in years. Comfort. One evening, they sat outside on two rickety chairs watching clouds roll across the moon. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. Jack glanced. "Of course I did, long time ago. What stopped you?" "My wife. She wanted to stay, said healing didn't come from running, said it came from planting your feet." Emily turned that over in her mind like a stone in her hand. "She sounds like she was good for you." "She was better than I deserved." Emily didn't press further. She didn't need to. The air held, enough weight between them already. The next morning, Jack noticed a black SUV parked near the edge of the dirt road. Windows tinted, engine idling. The kind of car that didn't belong out here. He stepped off the porch slowly, caught the license plate just as it turned and disappeared into the trees. Emily came outside holding Lily's jacket. "What's wrong?" "Probably nothing," Jack lied. "But maybe lock the door when I'm not around." That night he kept his coat on the hook near the door, his boots beside the bed, just in case. 2 days later he caught sight of the SUV again. This time it was parked at the gas station. Same plate, same driver, though Jack only saw the edge of a face. Male, sharp profile, unfamiliar, but the kind of unfamiliar that feels too deliberate. Jack told himself it might not mean anything, but his hands felt tighter on the wheel than they should have. At the shed, he mentioned it casually. Emily went pale. "Black SUV?" she asked, voice low. "Yeah." She swallowed hard. "I think I know who it is." He waited. "My ex-husband, he never liked to lose." Jack leaned against the shed wall, arms crossed. "He dangerous?" Emily nodded once, slowly. "Not to me anymore. But he'll try to make a point. He'll say Lily belongs to him, that I stole her away." Jack looked at the cot, at the tea kettle, at Lily's boots beside the door. "You didn't steal anything. You brought her home." Emily turned her face away, blinking fast. "He has lawyers, money, and a need to control things. He'll come for her. For me. Maybe the land, too." Jack's voice came low, steady. "Then he'll find someone standing in his way." Emily looked at him, not as someone grateful, but as someone terrified to hope. "Don't put yourself in this," she whispered. "Please." He didn't answer, but that night he slept on the couch with a fire poker leaning against the wall. The quiet had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting, holding its breath, and so was he. The first snow came early. Jack noticed it. Before sunrise, thin, dry flakes whispering across the windshield of his truck as he pulled up to the shed. It didn't stick yet, but it warned of what was coming. The season was shifting, and so was everything else. Inside, Emily had already stoked the fire. Lily was still asleep on the cot, one arm flung across her forehead like a tiny, overworked dreamer. Emily stood at the window, arms folded, eyes locked on the tree line. She didn't turn when Jack entered. "He was here last night," she said. Jack didn't ask how she knew. There was a pack of cigarettes on the porch rail, she added. He doesn't even smoke. It's just a message. Jack's jaw set. He walked back out without a word and checked the perimeter. Nothing broken, nothing missing. But the air felt disturbed, like something had been stirred and hadn't settled back. When he came back inside, Emily was pouring coffee with both hands trembling. "I left that life," she said. "I left him. The fear, the bruises, the lies. But he's always been good at reminding me I can't outrun him." Jack didn't say much. He just took the cup, set it down gently, and wrapped her hands in his. His palms were rough, worn by years of work and fire, but they held steady. "You're not running now," he said. "You're standing still. That counts." They heard Lily stir behind them. Emily stepped away, composed herself, and helped her daughter up. Jack watched the way she tucked the girl's hair back, the way she smiled even through a throat full of thorns. He admired it more than he could say. Later that morning, Jack went into town for supplies. The general store was quiet, wooden floorboards creaking like they were remembering something. He was gathering nails when Sheriff Briggs stepped in, brushing snow off his coat. "You heard anything about a black SUV parked out by the Wilkes place?" Jack asked casually. Briggs stopped. "You saw it again?" Emily found a message. Her ex. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Name?" "Grayson. Delmont." Briggs let out a slow breath. "That name carries trouble. He's litigious, cold. I've seen the type. Never fights clean." Jack gave a hard nod. "Just keep your eyes open." "More than that," Briggs said. "We'll make sure she's not alone." Back at the shed, Jack reinforced the locks and helped move the cot further from the window. That evening, Emily made stew. It wasn't much, but it smelled like something safe. They ate together around the half-finished kitchen table. Lily, with her crayons, drew 3 stick figures again, this time holding hands. Underneath, she scrawled one word in crooked block letters. Home. Emily looked at the drawing for a long time, then at Jack. "You don't have to keep protecting us," she said. "You didn't sign up for this." Jack leaned back in his chair. "I didn't sign up for losing my wife either, or burying my son. Life doesn't hand you permission, slips, it hands you people, and choices." He stood and walked toward the fire, then turned back. "And I'm choosing this." Emily's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded once, like an oath had been spoken in a language only the two of them understood. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Jack and Emily sat on the front step beneath the cold stars. She handed him a folded piece of paper, a letter her ex had sent her weeks ago. "He says he'll take her. Says I'm unstable. That the land isn't safe." Jack read it, then tore it in half and let the pieces fall into the fire pit beside them. "If he comes, he'll have to go through me." Emily didn't respond with words. She just leaned her head against his shoulder. A long, slow exhale followed. Snow began to fall again, soft and silent, like forgiveness. Inside the shed, the fire burned steady, and outside, the man who had taken everything once before was getting closer. The storm came fast, wind howling like wolves between the trees, snow lashing sideways across the windows. Jack had just finished stacking firewood inside when Lily tugged at his coat, her eyes wide. "Someone's outside." Jack's heart dropped. He strode to the front of the shed and looked through the slats of the boarded window. Headlights cut, through the storm, creeping down the dirt road like a serpent with eyes. The black SUV rolled to a stop, engine idling. Emily stood behind him, holding Lily close. "It's him!" Grayson Delmont stepped out like a man who thought the world still belonged to him. Expensive coat, smug smile. His boots crunched against the frozen ground as he walked to the porch and knocked. Jack didn't move. Another knock. Louder. "Emily," came the voice from the other side. "Let's not make this worse." Emily's grip on Lily tightened. Jack turned to her. "Take her to the back. Don't come out until I say." Jack, go! She obeyed, swallowing whatever protest trembled on her lips. Jack stepped forward and opened the door just enough to meet Grayson's gaze. You're not welcome here. Grayson didn't flinch. You must be the handyman, or whatever she's calling you. I'm the man standing between you and the family you hurt. Grayson smirked. That's sweet. But this isn't your business. Jack stepped outside, letting the door shut behind him. Snow swirled between them. She doesn't want you here. Lily doesn't want you here. That's the end of it. Grayson moved in closer, the arrogance in his voice turning colder. This land is in dispute. She left in breach of court orders, and she took my daughter. She protected her daughter. Grayson's nostrils flared. I'm taking Lily, tonight. No, Jack said, you're not. Then came the second vehicle, another SUV, darker with two men stepping out. Broad shoulders, hard eyes, hired muscle. Jack tensed. The porch boards groaned under his boots. You think you're protecting her? Grayson said. You're playing hero in a story that's already over. But Jack didn't move. His body stood like the shed itself, weathered, scarred, but holding. You'll have to go through me. One of the men approached, reaching inside his coat. Jack stepped forward, fists clenched. Don't. A long beat. Then, a voice broke. The air. Sheriff's on his way. They turned. Sheriff Briggs, flanked by two deputies, emerged from the trees, shotguns lowered but present. Behind them, the general store owner, the baker, even the quiet old man who fixed fences, all bundled in coats watching. Grayson's eyes flicked from face to face. His mask slipped. Jack didn't gloat. He just stood taller. Briggs approached. This land isn't under dispute. Emily Wilkes is the rightful owner, and Lily stays with her mother unless a court says otherwise, which it hasn't. Grayson laughed hollowly. This isn't over. It is tonight, Briggs said. The hired men backed away. Grayson spat into the snow, then turned to leave. As the SUVs disappeared into the dark, the gathered townspeople remained. Silent. Present. One by one, they nodded to Jack, then turned back down the road, steps slow, deliberate, like guardians. Returning to their watch, Jack stepped inside. Emily stood there, Lily in her arms, tears streaking her face. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, Jack said. Even if it cost everything. Emily reached for him, and for the first time they held each other, not from fear, but from the weight of survival, of choosing each other in the middle of a storm. Lily tugged at his sleeve. You're not leaving, are you? Jack knelt. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Then the wind softened, and for the first time in a long, long time, the door didn't feel like something meant to shut. It felt like something that could stay open. Like home. The morning after the standoff was quiet. Too quiet. Snow had blanketed the ground in a soft hush, and the sky sat over the town like a closed book. Jack rose early, shoulders aching, head still heavy with the images of the night before, the faces in the dark, the weight of standing his ground. Emily made pancakes, thin and imperfect, but warm. Jack ate without complaint. Lily offered him, one shaped like a heart, then giggled when he pretended to eat it in one bite. For a few brief hours it felt like peace had settled in. Then the fire came. It started just after sundown. Jack had gone back to his place to fetch more blankets. Emily was bathing Lily in a tin tub near the stove when the scent hit her. Acrid, wrong, thick in the back of the throat. She grabbed a towel, wrapped Lily, and ran outside. The back corner of the shed was in flames, curling fast along the old beams Jack hadn't gotten to yet. By the time Jack returned, he saw the orange glow from the road. Emily, he shouted, barreling through the smoke. We're out, she called back, coughing. Lily crying in her arms. Jack ran through the door, soaking a wool blanket and smothering what he could. He kicked open the side storage closet and hauled out the propane tank just before the flames reached it. The fire burned hard and fast. Too fast. The back half collapsed just as the town siren wailed in the distance. The townsfolk came again, this time with buckets, hoses, shovels. They did what they could, but the shed couldn't be saved. The shell of it smoldered into the frozen ground, the roof giving in with a final groan. Emily stood wrapped in Jack's coat, arms around Lily, watching the place she'd made a home turn to ash. Jack walked to her, smoke in his clothes, soot on his face. He didn't speak, just stood beside her as they watched the last beam fall. "I thought we were safe," she whispered. "So did I." They stood in silence, broken only by the hissing snow as it fell onto hot timber. The next morning, the shed was a skeleton. Steam still rose from the blackened earth. Jack sifted through the remains, finding little salvageable, half the table they'd built, scorched drawings, a bent nail still warm. He carried what he could back to the cabin. That night, Emily and Lily stayed with him. No one talked much. Jack made soup. Lily fell asleep in his bed, and Emily took the couch until Jack insisted they switch. He stayed by the fire most of the night, watching it burn low, a hand around the wooden heart Lily had once given him. It wasn't just a shed they'd lost. It was proof they were rebuilding, that their hands still made things worth holding. "I should have stayed," he muttered once, to no one. "Should have been there." "You were there," Emily said softly behind him. "You're still here." Jack didn't answer. Because grief has no language, only breath, only quiet. And in that silence, two people sat close to the edge of breaking but did not break. Not this time. The next day dawned gray and wet, the air thick with the lingering scent of smoke and damp pine. Jack rose early, rubbing ash-stained hands through his hair as he stared out the cabin window at the still-smoking ruin. Something about the blackened bones of the shed reminded him of old grief, familiar, scorched, but no longer terrifying. He found Emily already awake, sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, Lily leaning against her shoulder, still half asleep. A mug of coffee sat untouched beside her. "We can't stay here forever," she said quietly. "I know." She looked up at him, weary but steady. "I don't want to start over again. I want to rebuild. Here." Jack nodded. "Then we rebuild." They walked back to the site just after breakfast. Neighbors were already there. Briggs, Evelyn from the bakery, old Henry from the hardware store, even the teenagers. Jack barely nodded. 2 in town were there, unloading timber from their father's truck. "We figured you might need a hand," Briggs said simply. Jack didn't reply. He just nodded once, tight-lipped, and started digging out the remaining charred beams. The work began before lunch. By mid-afternoon, a new foundation had been outlined in the frost-hardened ground. Everyone moved as though this were their own home, their own loss, their own story to redeem. Lily wandered through the crowd, handing out warm cookies Evelyn had packed. Emily drew out rough sketches for the layout, keeping it simple, keeping it safe. Jack oversaw the wood framing but didn't say much. His silence was full, not empty. That night, the frame of a new shed stood upright, not finished but proud. The porch posts were thicker now, the windows wider, the roof pitched just a little higher, enough to catch more sun come spring. Inside the cabin, Jack wiped the sawdust from his forearms while Emily stirred soup in his small kitchen. "You didn't have to build it again," she said. Jack leaned against the counter. "It's not just a shed, it's proof we stayed." Emily nodded. "Lily wants to call it the Promise House." He smiled at that, soft and genuine. She's not wrong. Later that week, they began building a new table from salvaged wood. Emily sanded each board with care, humming as she worked. Jack fit the joints, tightened the legs. Lily helped hammer a crooked nail, then beamed like she'd done something enormous. When it was done, they sat around it for the first time, plates mismatched, candles flickering. The table still smelled like smoke and pine. Jack took his pocket knife and carved something beneath the table lip, quiet and simple. No promises. Just every day. Emily touched the letters with her thumb, then reached across and took his hand. They didn't need to speak. The table said enough, and outside the frost was thawing. The town had gathered not just to help them rebuild a structure, but to stitch them into the fabric of something deeper, a place where their story belonged, a place called home. Morning came with a thin sheen of frost across the fields, catching the rising sun like shattered glass. Jack stepped outside in his flannel shirt, coffee steaming in his hand. From the top of the small hill behind the cabin, he could see the new shed in full, framed, roofed, not quite finished, but standing tall against the cold. They'd planted a tree beside it 2 nights ago, Lily had insisted. A young sugar maple barely thicker than her wrist. Jack didn't know if it would survive the winter, but it didn't matter. That wasn't the point. Behind him, the door creaked open and Emily stepped out, wrapped in an old quilt. She didn't speak, just leaned her head against his arm, and together they watched the early light stretch across the land. In town, there had been whispers, soft ones, kind ones. People were asking if Jack and Emily were a thing. Some asked out of curiosity, others with a hopefulness in their voice, like maybe something good had taken root again on their side of the hill. He didn't answer those questions. Neither did she. But every night now the lamp in the shed flickered on. Every morning the smell of baking bread mingled with the scent of cut wood. It was a kind of answer, he supposed. Later that day, Lily helped Jack paint the trim along the windows. She had a tiny roller just for her, and left a streaky heart-shaped blotch beside the door that no one had the heart to correct. "This place looks different," she said, stepping back, face smeared with paint and pride. "It is different," Jack replied. "Because of you." That evening, the townsfolk returned, not to help this time, but to celebrate. Evelyn brought apple pie. Briggs grilled something that might have once been pork. Music played low from an old battery radio someone had set on the windowsill. The shed's new porch glowed with strings of mismatched lights someone had found in their attic. It wasn't a party exactly, just neighbors being neighbors. And for the first time, Jack didn't stand at the edge of it. He sat at the table. He'd built Lily on his lap, Emily beside him, her fingers curled gently over his. Sheriff Lane raised a mason jar of lemonade and gave a short toast to standing back up even when you didn't plan to. Laughter, applause, a few teary eyes. As the night deepened and the stars began their slow, steady shimmer, people drifted home in pairs and small groups, their boots crunching softly on. The frosty grass, only a few stayed behind to help clean up. Jack waved them off. "Go, we've got it." Inside, the new table was cluttered with plates and cups, sticky with juice and crumbs. Jack didn't mind. It looked lived in. Emily leaned her hip against the counter, watching Lily draw sleepy circles on the foggy window pane. "You know," she said, "for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm holding my breath." Jack was quiet a moment. "Yeah, me neither." She turned to him. "I was afraid you'd never trust again." He met her eyes. "I was afraid of the same thing." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of things unsaid, but understood. Things they'd built, not promised. Things they'd stayed for. Lily finally drifted off to sleep on the old couch, blanket up to her chin, mouth slightly open. Emily knelt beside her, brushed hair from her forehead, then looked at Jack. "We should tell her soon," she whispered. "Tell her what?" "That she can stay, that we're not going anywhere." Jack nodded. "We'll tell her tomorrow." He stepped outside again before bed, as had become his habit. The maple tree stood still in the moonlight, bare branches catching silver light. He knelt beside it, pressed a hand into the dirt. It felt solid, rooted. Behind him, Emily stood in the doorway, wrapped in the same quilt as that morning. "You keep checking on it like it's your kid." Jack looked up. "In a way, it is. Just takes longer to grow." She came down the steps and joined him in the quiet. "You ever wonder," she said, What would have happened if I hadn't knocked on your door that night? He smiled. Sometimes. But only to remind myself to be glad you did. The breeze shifted, just enough to rustle the leaves still clinging to the trees. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he rested his chin gently against her hair. They didn't say anything more. They didn't need to, because sometimes love doesn't arrive with trumpets or grand gestures. Sometimes it just stays, day after day, wordless, strong, chosen. 3 months later, winter softened. The porch had chairs now. The maple tree had a name. Lily had declared it the promise tree on a Tuesday morning with snow still on the roof. They carved a bench together and placed it beside the tree. Jack often sat there in the early hours, coffee in hand, watching frost thaw along the grass. Sometimes Lily joined him, sometimes Emily, sometimes both. He didn't think in terms of happy endings anymore. He thought in mornings, in warm hands, in the sound of laughter echoing off wood beams he helped raise, in the creak of a floor he could call his. This was not the life he lost, it was the one he chose. If this story found a quiet place in your heart, stay with us. Because sometimes choosing to stay, quietly, gently, is the most powerful promise we ever make.